A wave of discontent has swept across the United States, manifesting in massive, coordinated protests that have brought cities to a standstill and echoed through the halls of power. From the bustling streets of New York City to the sun-drenched avenues of Los Angeles, hundreds of thousands of Americans have taken to the streets under the banner of the hands-off movement. Their message is a direct and forceful rebuke of President Trump's economic policies. The immediate trigger was the administration's announcement of steep new tariffs. Critics say these tariffs threaten to upend the American economy and destabilize global trade. These demonstrations are deeply personal, fueled by fear about families, jobs, and the rising cost of everyday life. Organizers reported over 1,500 distinct events across all 50 states. In Midtown Manhattan, protesters brought traffic to a complete halt, creating a sea of humanity stretching for blocks. The energy on the ground is palpable: outrage, solidarity, determined resolve to be heard. This is a broad coalition from every walk of life. The timing followed a devastating two-day plunge on Wall Street. The market reaction erased trillions of dollars in value. That validated fears and turned policy into a tangible crisis. Millions saw their retirement savings evaporate and fears of recession mounted. For many marchers, the link between the tariffs and market chaos was crystal clear, fueling urgent action. These demonstrations are deeply personal, fueled by fear about families, jobs, and the rising cost of everyday life. This opposition poses a major political challenge and shows no signs of backing down. The catalyst for the current economic and social turmoil was a dramatic announcement from the White House. President Trump, in a move that stunned allies and adversaries alike, declared a national emergency concerning the national trade deficit. He designated April 2nd as Liberation Day, framing his policy shift as a bold act of reclaiming American economic sovereignty. The centerpiece of this declaration was the imposition of what he termed reciprocal tariffs, a universal minimum 10% tariff on nearly all imported goods, from countries not already facing other specific sanctions. The policy was set to take effect on April 5th. It was one of the most aggressive, broad-based protectionist measures in modern American history. A tariff is essentially a tax on imported goods. Its intent: make foreign products more expensive. That pushes consumers and businesses to buy domestically. Proponents, including President Trump, argued tariffs would protect domestic industries. They also said tariffs would help reduce trade deficits and pressure other countries to change trade practices. But the approach carried big risks: higher prices for consumers, disrupted international supply chains, and retaliatory tariffs, escalating into a trade war. The immediate reaction was widespread panic. Financial markets and governments were caught off guard. Panic triggered the 2025 stock market crash. Investors sold off assets. The administration temporarily paused the extra country-specific tariffs, slated for April 9th, for 90 days. Combined with other duties, it pushed the average U.S. applied tariff rate to 27%. The move placed the U.S. and the world in uncharted economic territory, with consequences still unfolding. The massive hands-off protests that have swept the nation were not a spontaneous or random occurrence. They were the result of a meticulously planned and rapid mobilization effort by a diverse and powerful coalition of organizations. According to organizers, more than 150 different groups came together to coordinate the more than 1,500 protests that took place across the country. This broad-based coalition included some of the nation's most prominent civil rights organizations, such as the American Civil Liberties Union, alongside influential labor unions, veterans associations, women's rights groups, and LGBTQ+ advocates. This unity among traditionally disparate groups highlights the widespread nature of the opposition and the belief that the impacts of the tariffs will be felt across all segments of society, transcending typical political and social divides. The organizational backbone for this nationwide movement was provided by groups like Indivisible, which played a leading role in coordinating the logistics and communication for the events. They leveraged modern organizing tools and vast networks of grassroots activists to ensure a powerful and unified showing. The strategy was clear: to make their presence felt everywhere, from the steps of state capitals and the lawns of federal buildings to the local offices of congressional representatives. The goal, as one organizer stated, was to hold these demonstrations anywhere we can make sure they hear us. The response was overwhelming. with nearly 600,000 people signing up online to attend the various events, demonstrating a deep well of public readiness to engage in direct action against the administration's policies. The message from the movement's leaders was one of defiance and resilience. Donna Lieberman, the executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, captured the spirit of the day while speaking to the massive crowd in New York City. New Yorkers are here today. Americans around the country are out in the streets saying no way, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. We're not going to give up without a fight. The protests were positioned as the first line of defense against policies a wide swath of the public finds dangerous and harmful. The movement created a powerful narrative of shared risk. The reaction from the financial markets to President Trump's tariff announcement was not just negative, it was swift, brutal, and historic. Within moments of the news breaking, a furious wave of selling began, lasting nearly unabated for 2 days and wiping out more than $5 trillion in value from U.S. shares alone. This staggering figure represents a colossal loss of wealth, impacting institutional investment portfolios and 401k retirement plans of ordinary working Americans. The market crash, as Bloomberg described it, is one for the history books. The velocity and scale of losses signaled that investors saw the tariff plan as a direct threat to economic stability and corporate profitability. The damage spread across all sectors. The Nasdaq 100 plunged, entering a bear market. But equities weren't the only pain point. Oil collapsed, copper collapsed, agricultural commodity prices collapsed. Traders anticipated a global slowdown. In the corporate bond market, panic set in. Investors bought credit default swaps, insurance against corporate defaults. That flight to safety showed a deep loss of confidence in American business. The reaction stemmed from how aggressive and unexpected the tariff plan was. Markets had braced for targeted tariffs, but the announcement of a universal 10% tariff and the possibility of rates up to 50% on dozens of countries was an extreme scenario few analysts had expected. The 2-day rout left Wall Street with its worst week in 5 years. The crash was a devastating vote of no confidence from the global financial system in the administration's new economic direction. While the drama of a stock market crash captures headlines with its staggering numbers, the true impact of the new tariffs will ultimately be measured not on Wall Street, but on Main Street. The fundamental mechanism of a tariff is to make imported goods more expensive. In today's interconnected global economy, a vast array of consumer products are either made abroad or assembled using foreign-made components. Electronics, clothing, furniture, food. When the cost of importing these items goes up due to a 10% or higher tariff, businesses are faced with a choice: absorb the increased cost and accept lower profits, or pass that cost along to the consumer in the form of higher prices. Most economists agree that in the long run, the bulk of this cost will be borne by American households. This reality was starkly articulated by Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, who issued a clear warning that consumers should brace for impact. It is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected, Powell stated. He went on to explain the unavoidable consequences, noting that the economic effects will include higher inflation and slower growth. Higher inflation means that every dollar a family earns will buy a little less, effectively acting as a pay cut. The cost of a weekly grocery run, a new pair of shoes for a child, a replacement for a broken appliance could all rise, putting a significant strain on household budgets, especially for low and middle-income families who spend a larger portion of their income on essential goods. Beyond the direct impact on consumer prices, there is a deep and growing concern about the effect these tariffs will have on American jobs. While a key argument for tariffs is the protection of domestic industries, many U.S. businesses, particularly in manufacturing, are heavily reliant on global supply chains. A company that assembles cars in Ohio, for example, may use steel from Brazil, electronics from South Korea, and rubber from Thailand. A steep tariff on these imported components dramatically increases the cost of production, making the final American-made product less competitive both at home and abroad. The impact of President Trump's tariff announcement was not confined to the borders of the United States. It sent immediate and powerful shockwaves across the globe, sparking international condemnation and triggering protests in other affected nations. One of the most vivid displays of this global anger erupted in Brazil, a major trading partner slated to be hit with some of the highest U.S. tariffs in the world. On the very first day that the new tariff campaign went into effect, Demonstrations broke out in major Brazilian cities. Sao Paulo, Brasilia. In the streets of Sao Paulo, demonstrators burned a pair of effigies, one representing President Trump and the other representing their own president, Jair Bolsonaro. The two were positioned together in a symbolic, unwelcome embrace. Protesters waved placards with visceral imagery, some depicted Trump with devil horns. A large banner captured the core sentiment of the demonstrations, bearing the slogan, "Sovereignty is not negotiable." The backlash in Brazil is emblematic of a broader international response characterized by disbelief and dismay. For decades, the United States has been a leading proponent of a global trading system based on established rules and gradual tariff reduction. The administration's abrupt shift toward aggressive protectionism is viewed by many allies as an abdication of that leadership role. Governments from Europe to Asia have voiced deep concern. Retaliatory tariffs from major trading partners like the European Union, China, and Brazil directly harm American exporters, particularly farmers and manufacturers of high-value goods. Jerome Powell has made it unequivocally clear the administration's path is perilous, linking the tariff hikes to higher inflation and slower economic growth. The next few months are critical. One thing is clear, the fight is far from over for hundreds of thousands in the streets. The hands-off movement has mobilized a broad coalition. Its leaders vow to continue the campaign. Defiant voices at home and abroad insist they will be heard.